will just join in. Hopefully you'll know what we're doing. We're sitting here quietly. So as before, my legs here. Sit comfortably, spine erect. Sometimes there are 8 postures of Vairochana that are explicitly mentioned in the sutras that are meant to be the perfect sitting position, meditation position. So one of the things that's useful is sometimes to remember, if your mind is sort of wandering off, if your head is up, pulling your chin a little, and the spine is erect, and the hands in your lap, and so forth. So relax your body, relax your mind, and put your attention, place your attention, your mindfulness on the breathing in front, as it's said in the sutras. Make a mental note of the quality of the respiration right now, how deep, rapid, or subtle and slow it is, for comparison later. And follow one breath up as though it's going to the crown of your head down to your heart chakra. Leave your attention there and just watch your mental consciousness. The worries, maybe memories of the past, plans for the future, observations about the present 3 times. Recognize that they are all appearing, emerging out of the spaciousness of the mind. And from our previous meditation, if you have a slight remembering consciousness of that, bring that up. And recall that you can let go of the thoughts by simply recalling that they are not the very nature of the mind. That you can focus on the nature of the mind behind them, within which, the very nature of the spaciousness of the mind within which they are emerging or appearing. And by depriving them of attention, the thoughts lose their intensity and eventually will absorb back seemingly absorb back into the nature of the mind. Let go of your apprehension of the seemingly looming quality of the body. So sort of really there, just that is appearing to your mental consciousness. But place your attention, instead of the appearance of the body, on the spaciousness of the mind within which it's appearing. The self as an observer is just a concept and appearance to the mind. Let go of that. And occasionally even let go of your mental image of the mind. That is to say, what you think is the mind that you're perceiving, the clear light nature. Recognize that that as yet is just a mental appearance. Try to sense the actual spaciousness of the mind within which that is emerging. I think this is the conventional clear light nature of my mind. What I'm trying to get at, the conventional Buddha nature. It's a great resource to be able to recognize this when problems are looming, so to speak, when there are many problems in your life. The fact that we can recognize this right now is, of course, due to our wisdom, but because of this fortuitous opportunity of having a life of leisure and endowment, try to make again and again the aspiration to use this perfect human rebirth for its ultimate aim of achieving enlightenment, not being caught up in the appearances of this lifetime, the 8 worldly dharmas. I think I'm going to participate in the class this morning or evening, in Kevin's case, in order to become a better person, ultimately enlightened being, but better every day in order to be less of a burden for other sentient beings with my problematic behavior, my anger, my attachment, my clinging, my nonsense. But then eventually, once overcoming bad habits, bad habit energy, to actually benefit them, oh, how wonderful that would be if I could selflessly work for the benefit of sentient beings without pride, without making a big point of it, loving, compassionate. I'm going to use this time this morning with a motivation to become this kind of person, ultimately a Buddha who can spontaneously and effortlessly benefit all sentient beings, having recognized our intimate relationship with them, even from the Chittamatra point of view. They've all been our mother numberless times. They're all equal with us in wanting to be happy and be free of suffering. I'm going to participate in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And then arising from that, I've asked before if there are any questions, but no one's ever offered any questions about the meditation. But so if you do have any, you're welcome to ask. Let's say this praise requesting prayer to Manjushri, red yellow Manjushri here, although it's the praise doesn't mention, I don't think it mentions red yellow in the praise. So there's also white Manjushri and other kinds of Manjushri. So the words go, homage to my guru and protector, Venerable Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scripture, Prajnaparamita Sutra, symbolic of his seeing all as it is, whose pure genius shines like the sun unclouded by the two obscurations, who with compassion like a father for his only child, teaches with 60-fold eloquence all beings imprisoned in cyclic existence, groping in the darkness of ignorance and overwhelmed by suffering, whose thunder-like proclamation of the perfection of wisdom arouses us from the stupor of our afflictions and frees us from the iron chains of karma, who wields wisdom's sword, vanquishing the darkness of ignorance, hewing down every sprout of suffering. You who are primordially pure, who have finished the 10 grounds, complete embodiment of every excellence, whose princely body is graced with the 112 adornments. O Manjushri, to you I bow. Dispel the darkness of my mind. And then we'll recite the Omarapasanadi mantra 21 times, and then 108 or 100 or 108 times the seed syllable D that you imagine at the tip of your tongue to begin with. And then after repeating that on one breath, swallows saliva as though that D is coming down to your heart chakra, and let it merge with your mind. Om Arabazanari, 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 Om Arabazanari. Om Arabazanari, Om Arabazanari, Om Arabazanari. Om Arabazanari. Okay. Thank you. Let's see all the gallery of people. So here we are again. Any questions or observations? Okay, so Donnie or Danny has had a question, a couple of questions from last time she emailed in. So one of her questions is, why haven't we mentioned Shentong? Have you heard of Shentong before? Any of you? No. No. So Shen means other, Tong means empty. So it's talking about a particular kind of concept, mainly in the Madhyamaka. So that's why it's not been mentioned, Donnie, talking about an emptiness of other. So usually emptiness in the Madhyamaka means a lack of intrinsic existence in the object that you are concerning with, that you're taking as your object of observation, say the emptiness of the person or the emptiness of an object. Shentong, usually what we say is that there's a sense grasping to an inherent nature that seems to be the very nature of the object, existing within the object. Shentong is talking about another kind of emptiness. It's like let's say that the self is empty of ignorance or empty of, like say for instance, if you talk about a monastery, a temple, you can talk about the temple is empty of monks. So empty of something which is not always there. Anyway, so that's not, we'll talk perhaps like about that in the Madhyamaka section, but it's not applicable here in the Chittamatra, so it hasn't come up.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Danny also asked about the etymology of the word egist.
Oh my God, that is driving me nuts. I've looked it up. Oh yes, what do you say about that?
Well, I don't know. I should look in the Tibetan Sanskrit dictionary. I'm not sure if it is actually has a term in Sanskrit, but
it doesn't really. I have the Hopkins Tibetan dictionary in front of me right now with that. I sent you a screenshot. Maybe you didn't see that. It doesn't seem to have a Sanskrit. It's based on a Tibetan word that means like sperm, egg.
It means egg, yeah. If you're having eggs for breakfast, please give me an egg.
Yeah. Go. Is it go? No.
Gonga.
Yeah, like gonad. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. not gonad, go nga.
Right. But yeah.
NGA, nga, go nga.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Maybe because the etymology, I think I saw once something talking about the etymology, but my own feeling is that like an egg has two parts, a yolk and the white, if you and so when you talk about part this and part that, like you have they joke something, about and when one of the Jason Bourne movies, when the heroic member of the CIA was meeting with some nasty kind of member of the CIA or whatever they were, FBI, whatever, and she said, "Oh, you're having please enjoy your egg white omelet." He wanted healthy, not like not like a, the
Manly,
thing.
manly, real.
Just that's kind of half eggist. She just had the whites, sometimes you need the yolks to make tapioca or something like that. But anyway, we'll leave that.
What's interesting about this, if I may say, is that, okay, so there's the male and the female, the bindus, and those are like, they form the totality that forms our perhaps consciousness. And so it could be related to, it says also from the viewpoint, oh, I can't do it. I get tongue-tied when I try to talk. I can write.
You send me an email. We'll talk about it.
I'll send you an email. Okay? Thank you so much.
Okay. So otherwise people will get bored. They'll think we're only spending our time talking about omelets or eggs or something.
Thank you so much.
So, some things from last time, some observations of our discussion leader talking about the, let me make this bigger. Can I make this full screen here? There we go. That the idea of knowing other people's minds seemed to be absurd in the Chittamatra, that there's the famous solipsistic fallacy associated with it, that you can't know others' minds. Of course, as Bob had mentioned in a note to me, although I'm not sure he's actually seen the actual text by Dharmakirti, where he tries to, from the Chittamatra point of view, explain away the apparent non-existence of others' minds. So let's just hear what we're talking about. When you talk about mind only, we are assuming here that everything, Chittamatra means mind only, right? That everything that appears to us as external to oneself is actually not external to your mind. It is actually arisen from the mind itself. One seed, and maybe kind of, we're talking about seed or bindo or whatever, it has within it, when it ripens for any kind of perception, one half of it ripens as the subject, one half of it ripens as the object. They ripen simultaneously. So it's not as though in the other systems where we talk about external objects, that first there is the object, the cause, and then the consciousness arises from that. The subject and object arise simultaneously, which other systems generally do not accept. But then it leads you to the question, well, I see other, I think I see other people, I hear other people, I embrace other people, but maybe they don't, maybe there's no one out there. Maybe I'm the only one. Because there's, Chittamatra says they're the nature of the mind. But Chittamatra doesn't say that. It does say that there are other minds. And Bob was not convinced by some of my arguments last time. I mentioned something called collective karma and individual karma, which this is something which is accepted by the Chittamatra. And one of the famous texts on sort of Abhidharma, we talk about two Abhidharma texts usually in Tibetan Buddhism. We say the lower Abhidharma, which means Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha, which is like a compendium of higher wisdom. Abhidharma, in the text itself, it defines, says, what is Abhidharma? It says, Abhidharma is pristine wisdom, so higher wisdom. So it's the compendium of higher wisdom. Some people translate it as other things. It's sort of like a collection, a compendium, a kosha, which is like a sheath or or a where you can put everything, or it's like a repository of knowledge. That's called the lesser Abhidharma. The higher Abhidharma is Asanga's, his Vasubandhu's brother, wrote a text on Abhidharma from the Mahayana point of view called the Abhidharma Samuchaya. So there may be more than one translation into English. Famous, I think, French monk, or else maybe he was, or maybe not. I'm not sure of his actual background. He translated into French, and that has been translated into English. So I'm going to read you from the translation. I think it's, what is it, Bob? Rahula? What's his name? Wapola?
No. I think that oh, you're talking about Asanga's text.
Yes.
Yeah. Is it Rahula Walpole or?
Yeah. So anyway, I can, you can check that later. But in that text on page 118, it says, the sutra mentions common action, sadharana karma, and non-common action. So this sadharana karma is what we usually call as tunmongile, so common, sort of collective karma and individual karma. So what is common action? This is what we call collective karma. It is action that produces the various changes in the receptacle world, the environment, the inanimate world. So generally, when we in Buddhism, when we talk about existence, one way of dividing it, which we experience, we talk about the vessel world, which means like the environment, and the inhabitants therein, which means sentient beings. So collective karma is that which we collect in synchronicity with others, which brings about collective experiences. Some of it is massive, like the existence of the universe that we are born into. We all experience this universe together, this so-called Saha world system, because we've created collective karma in the past to experience it together. And then we have our own individual experiences within that, like I was talking about last time about, some people may enjoy the flavor of something, other people may not enjoy it, and so forth. So although it might seem contradictory, the Chittamatra does accept the existence of collective karma. The mechanism by which it is created, well, even in the non-Chittamatra schools, how you how collective karma affects you is not explicitly mentioned, but somehow activities that you are engaged in together leave their imprints on your mind, but because they are imprints that are shared with others, that is called collective karma. So I'm not going to belabor that, but I just wanted to mention, and in terms of one other point, when we talk about Solipsism, this is Bob, do you have this book?
Yes.
Arisparum's Ocean of Eloquence. So this is a text that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote, translation of the text that Lama Tsongkhapa wrote, along with Gareth's commentary sometime, called Kunshi Kadel, the difficult points of Alaya Vijnana, Kunshi. We haven't talked about Kunshi yet, Alaya Vijnana. So I looked in the dictionary, I looked in the index of Gareth's book here under solipsism. Now, you know what solipsism means, right? How do you pronounce it? A-Y,
It's pronounced
Aisha.
Aisha.
Aisha. Aisha, do you know what solipsism means?
No.
So solipsism, I think, comes from the Greek, is that right? Our expert linguist here, Bob, solus, which means that sort of like a certain kind of idealism that how do you know that there is an outer world? Maybe everything, maybe you're the only person and all these are your own imaginations. More sophisticated, explicit explanations of it, but there is this idea that possibly Chittamatra is, kind of a solicism that because everything is the nature of your mind, how do you know that there are other beings? But Chittamatra does accept the existence of other beings. So when I looked up solipsism to see if that was in Gareth's translation, he had 2 pages mentioned, but the word solipsism doesn't appear on those pages. But he's prescient, intelligent enough to understand these famous quotations from Kunchit Kadel. Question, in that case, would not a single object become, this is on page 53, Bob. In that case, would not a single object become something that 2 consciousnesses grasp? If one agrees, how does one meet the objection that no object can be grasped in common, since if it was, 2 consciousnesses would be substantially the same? Okay, so your object is arisen from, some object that you're perceiving is arisen from propensity, seed on your consciousness, and your experience of that is the other half of the seed, which is creating the subject mind that's simultaneous with that object. So it is that object is the nature of your mind. If one agrees, how does one meet the objection that no object can be grasped in common? This is a theoretical objection, since if it was, 2 consciousnesses would be substantially the same. That is, your consciousness and the other person's consciousness. Since same on account of the fact that whatever appears to consciousness has the essence of that consciousness, has the nature of that consciousness. Okay, that's one of the tenets of Chittamatra. Whatever is appearing to your mind is of the nature of your mind. So the answer is there's no flaw here. What do we say in English? No problem. No problemo. The statement that whatever appears to consciousness has its essence, its nature, or is neither the same nor different from that consciousness, is pertinent, relevant at the time of vigorous investigation of the nature of that object. At that time, we deny a common object of the 2 consciousnesses. However, we accept the common object in the situation where there is no vigorous examination and investigation, and in such a context, deny that it has the essence of consciousness. So you can delve into that a little more. It doesn't mention more about it, but this is a famous, when you talk about solipsism, this is a famous quotation that people give from Lama Tsongkhapa. So it's a little bit reminiscent of this. In the Madhyamaka, when you talk about whether an object exists, you can do a gross investigation. You can say that Bob is in America. Where? Well, Bob's in New Mexico. Where? I'm not even sure. Where are you, Bob? You're in
Santa Fe.
Santa Fe. Where? Oh, he's at so-and-so street, that house. Where? In that house over there. Where? You go through, he's in the library. I assume that's the library. From the books. So where? Then you point to Bob and say, there's Bob. And then if you're not satisfied, that's called gross investigation, general investigation. a little bit like this quotation. If you ask, however, where is Bob? Is it his nose? Is it his beard? Is it his intellect? You're trying to find something which is Bob within the basis of imputation, you can't find. So generally, without detailed analysis, you can point to Bob. You can point out Bob. But if you try to find Bob within the object of imputation, you can't find. To my mind, it sounds a little bit like that. But you play with that. Those of you who followed this, those of you who didn't follow this, don't worry about it. Okay. Another thing I wanted to mention from last time, I had said that in the prayer of, oh, I think I actually typed it out here. Had it printed out. In the 64, oh, I didn't print it out. I'll have to look. The 64 qualities of harmonious speech of the Buddha, 64 harmonies. And bear with me just one second. There we go. I thought I would, my plan was to print it out, but I didn't do that. So let's see. There we go. So in the prayer to Manjushri, it talks about the 60 kinds of speech and powers. Okay, I'm going to leave it now. I'll have to have it for you even again next time. So I printed out so many other things here that I didn't print that out. So I'll have to find it for you. But usually we talk about the 64 harmonies, perfect kinds of speech of the Buddha, like water, moistening the mind, and so forth. Okay, I'm going to leave that right now. So we are going to continue with our exposition here.
I found that 64 qualities from Berzin. It's in the chat box.
Oh, that's where it was, in Alex Berzin's.
I
Alex
guessed
Berzin's,
correctly.
in fact, that's what I was thinking to print out. Yeah, so thank you for that. That's Donnie, is it?
Yes.
So you can find in Alex Berzin's, and Donnie has put in the chat box, apparently, a link to that. Okay, excellent. So you can go to that and you can see the 64 qualities. So when it says 60, it's just a way of saying 60-ish. 64 qualities of the Buddha. Okay. So now, getting back to our text. We had, we talked a bit about the actual text here. I'd given a general introduction to Chittamatra. We talked about the Chittamatran definition is a person propounding great vehicle tenets who does not accept external objects. That means external objects which are a different entity to the mind. From a certain point of view, Geshe Zopa used to say, Chittamatra does accept external objects, but not external objects that are of different nature of the mind. You still say, according to your perception, there are objects external to the mind, but they are actually the nature of the mind. A person propounding great vehicle tenets who does not accept external objects, but does assert truly established self-knowers. So that they talk about self-cognizing awareness. Remember the only people who didn't accept self-knowers? Anyone remember? Only two schools. Bob knows. Oh, you can say them.
Okay, yeah, it's Vaibhashika and Madhyamika.
Did you say Madhyamika?
Yeah,
I'm teasing. Madhyamika. Right.
yeah, Madhyamika.
Actually, it's the Prasangika. So the Madhyamaka includes Svatantrikas. Yogacaras do accept that. So in general, the Prasangika and the Vaibhashika do not accept self-knowers, the lowest and the highest. So here the divisions are, in our text, the true Aspectarians and the false Aspectarians. There's a more simple division. This division into true Aspectarians and false Aspectarians can get very, very subtle. A general way of dividing them is the followers of scripture and the followers of reasoning. You know, you make it more like in the Sautrantika, there were followers of scripture and followers of reasoning, and the Vaibhashika and so forth. So here, the followers of scripture follow Asanga's texts on the grounds, and Asanga's texts, and the followers of reasoning follow Dharmakirti's 7 texts on logic, on pramana. Okay. So here, the definition of a true Aspectarian, here it says Chittamatra true Aspectarian, mind-only true Aspectarian, a proponent of mind only who asserts that a direct perceiver apprehending form in the continuum of an ordinary being does not engage polluted by the latencies of ignorance in the factor, or say the portion of its appearance as a gross form. Wow. Does that make sense to anyone? Alish? Nadine? A little bit complicated sounding, right? The definition of a true Aspectarian is a Chittamatran who asserts that a direct perceiver apprehending form, and we're talking about in the continuum of an ordinary being. We're not talking about a Buddha. Direct perceiver apprehending form. So what does that mean? Let's say an eye consciousness apprehending blue does not engage polluted by the latencies of ignorance in the portion of the appearance as a gross form. So let's say if I'm looking at blue, there is a portion of the appearance is as a gross object, which is not just one single particle. It seems to be a conglomerate, even if it's just a patch of blue. It's not as though it's just a minute single atom or something like that. It seems to be something which is comprised of various portions. It's what's called a gross form. So it says that it does not engage polluted by the latencies of ignorance in the portion of its appearance as a gross form. The definition of a mind-only false Aspectarian is a proponent of mind only who asserts that a direct perceiver apprehending form in the continuum of ordinary being does engage polluted by the latencies of ignorance in the portion of the appearance as a gross form. I'm changing the word factor here to portion, which is cha in Tibetan, kind of makes more sense here. There are different portions of the appearance. One portion of the appearance is that it appears as blue. One is that it appears as an external object. Another portion of the appearance is that it appears as a gross object. Yeah, Bob.
Yeah, I was going to say, I found that this particular, I mean, usually the translation we have is very good, but this translation is very tortured. And in this case, the MacDonald translation, I can't pronounce her Tibetan name. But anyway, her translation, the other translation we have, is far more clear than this.
I agree. I noticed that too.
Yeah, I mean, this translation, I think, is a very bad translation. I mean, I'll read the MacDonald one.
Okay, thank you.
It says that the definition of a true aspect Chittamatran is, a Chittamatran who asserts that the part of the appearance that appears as a gross form to a form apprehending direct perceiver in an ordinary being's continuum is not polluted by the propensities of ignorance. I mean, that's the key idea, is that the appearance, the gross appearance, is not polluted by the propensities of ignorance. So it's said so much clearer in the MacDonald translation. Whereas I can't make any, it doesn't, you know, Swenson doesn't even make English sense to me. The grammar is so crazy.
Yeah.
I won't even read that other one. I stick with the McDonald's.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, sometimes some of the things she, when she talked about, oh yeah, like for instance, right here, when in the definition, a proponent of mind only, in our text here, Swenson's Sanskrit Chittamatra, proponent of cognition, Vijnapti Vadan, and yogic practitioner are equivalent. In Sangye Khandro's translation, she said, I think, instead of proponent of cognition, she said, what did she say? Proponent of aspect or something like that? What do you have Sangye Khandro's there?
She just said that the Vijnapti Vadan is just an Aspectarian.
Aspectarian. So that's not right. The Vijnapti doesn't mean aspect, because in Tibetan it has the word nampar in it, and nampa sometimes means aspect by itself, but nampar means kind of like V in Vijnapti. Jnapti is related with knowing, so it is talking about cognition, proponent of cognition. So in that case, Svensson's translation is better. In some cases, Sangye Khandro's is better. So that was a good observation about that, Bob, that this is a bit tortured here. So in this context, I've got so many books here. Let me just read you a little bit from this text by Jeffrey Hopkins and Geshe Zopa, who was one of my teachers. Generally, Jeffrey Hopkins' translations are very precise. So he's the translator, obviously, and he was translating this along with Geshe Zopa in the early days, who was an expert on the subject. So when we talk about there's many, many pages here on true Aspectarians and false Aspectarians. So the true Aspectarians hold that a blue patch of blue, appears as a gross or coalesced object, does in fact exist as a gross or coalesced object in the manner in which it appears, so that it is not polluted, it does not engage polluted by the latencies of ignorance, because it does exist that way. Does that make sense? Yeah, Bob.
I don't see how they can say it exists like that. I mean, it's almost as though, I mean, this external object comes from this latency on our own mind. And so it just pops out there. And so when you say, you know, it exists like that or doesn't exist like, it's just an appearance, right? So So how can you say whether that appearance corresponds to anything else? So
Well,
how can
the appearance, well, we would agree that the appearance of blue as blue is not polluted by ignorance because it is blue, right? Chittamatra would say that there are, blue is not yellow, is not red, is not green.
But how can our appearance be other than how it appears? I mean, when you say that the appearance isn't as it really is, it implies that there's some reference object that you can compare your appearance to, but all you've got is your appearance.
Well, here, the question is about whether things actually exist as gross objects. The true Aspectarians, I'm reading on page 251 if you have that book. The true Aspectarians hold that a blue patch that appears as a gross or coalesced object does in fact exist as a gross or coalesced object in the manner in which it appears, whereas the false Aspectarians say it does not. Being proponents of mind only, the true Aspectarians agree with the false Aspectarians in that the appearance of the blue patch as an external object is false. So the appearance of an object as external to the mind for the Chittamatra is polluted by the what do they call it here? The imprints. Oh yeah, polluted by the latencies of ignorance, the imprints of ignorance. The fact that things appear to be external, that is affected. They both agree. The true Aspectarians say that part is polluted by ignorance, latencies of ignorance, but the appearance of it as blue, both the false Aspectarians and the true Aspectarians accept that the appearance of blue is blue generally is not polluted by the imprints of ignorance, but that the fact that the object appears to be a gross object the false Aspectarians say that it is polluted by that ignorance. Let's say, whereas the false Aspectarians say that it is not. Being proponents of mind only, the true Aspectarians agree with the false Aspectarians that the appearance of a blue patch as an external object is false. They both say that. However, unlike the false Aspectarians, the true Aspectarians maintain that within the context of this false appearance as an external object, the portion of that appearance as a gross object is correct. The false Aspectarians, on the other hand, hold that there is a sense of grossness beyond which what is actually there. Okay, so I mention this as for those of you who want to investigate this further, because our text is very dense, it doesn't have any commentarial points here. That's meant to be the person like myself or Bob who's going to explain it to you. Bob, you had another point about that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that drives me crazy about these things is it says that the false Aspectarian says that, because it's all about the grossness. That's what we're talking about here. It's just whether that grossness is correct or not. But, what do the false Aspectarians say? Why isn't the grossness that appears correct? So how do they see it? Why is it different for them?
Okay, so we could go into that, but we're not going to go into it now. You can read there. Another good source is Jeffrey Hopkins' Maps of the Profound. So this particular subject of whether things actually appear as gross, they appear as gross objects, and whether they actually are gross objects is a matter of contention, even in Sautrantika in the other schools. But here, when we talk about Chittamatra, it has some more significance here. So the definition of a mind-only false Aspectarian, let's say, so mainly talking about gross form, I mentioned that. There are three types of true Aspectarians. This is kind of with Donnie's question. proponents of an equal number of apprehendeds and apprehenders. So I guess he mentions here that I think Sangye Kondo's text must have called it apprehended objects and apprehended subjects to apprehendeds and apprehenders. Okay. Proponents of an equal number of apprehendeds and apprehenders, half-egists, so maybe the yolk and the white, I don't know, non-pluralists. Each has its own individual assertions. Don't worry too much about this. This is going into a great detail about this particular subject. In other contexts, the followers of scripture and followers of reasoning may be a better way of dividing up the Chittamatrans. It is said that the proponents of an equal number of apprehendeds and apprehenders. So what does that mean? Subjects and objects, right? Apprehendeds are that which is grasped by the subject. You have a subject mind, and simultaneous with it, its object that it is apprehending. So the apprehended is the object, the apprehender is the subject, right? It is said that the proponents of an equal number of apprehendeds and apprehenders assert that when an eye consciousness apprehending the various colors on the wing of a butterfly, here it says mottled colors, variegated, that means, you know, various colors in juxtaposition to one another. Mottled colors on the wing of a butterfly. The proponents of equal number of apprehendeds and apprehenders say that they apprehend the mottle, the combination of colors, from the object side, the aspect of each color, blue, yellow, and so on, is delivered or cast, and also from the subject side, the aspect of each color, yellow, and so forth, is produced in its true aspect. So that would imply that you have many consciousnesses at the same time. When you're looking at the wing of a butterfly that has some yellow in one place and brown in another place and black and a little red or orange or something, each one of those aspects would be perceived by a subject consciousness, eye consciousness, as though there were many eye consciousnesses at the same time. So that position may not generally, that might not be acceptable to most Buddhists, because the general dictum is that any one consciousness only has one, let's say, one main consciousness. It might know them serially, you know, that one consciousness, if it focuses on the different colors, or it may just know it as a model, it's model or a variegated appearance altogether without spending time on investigating the individual colors. It is said that the half-egists assert that when such is apprehended, the model colors, variegated colors, from the object side, the aspect of each different color, blue, yellow, and so on, is delivered or cast. However, from the subject side, the aspect of each different color and so forth is produced in an aspectless manner. So that means it's just perceived as a totality. Just the model. It is said that the non-pluralists assert that when such is apprehended from the object side, the aspect of each color is not delivered, is not cast, but rather the aspect of the mere conglomeration. The whole model itself is delivered or cast, and from the subject side, the aspect of each color is not produced in an aspectless manner, but rather the aspect of the mere conglomeration is produced in an aspectless manner. I see Bob took off his glasses there. Okay. So if you want to investigate this more thoroughly, the two sources I would suggest is this text, many interpretations by different traditions in Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. Maybe this idea of is more analyzed by the Tibetans than in the Indian tradition. And the other one is Maps of the Profound, that big, thick book that you can use to flatten flowers and your leaves from your garden. It's so big, you know, like the encyclopedia. Bob, you have some other?
Yeah, I mean, I did find it interesting. There is another book that's often used with this course, which is the Buddhist Philosophy with Preston and Cozart. Daniel Cozart. I don't know if you could see the title. But anyway, in that book, he actually, I mean, I think he translates a slightly, translates a slightly different version of the text on Tenets. But he does mention that there are actually specific Indian Buddhists who hold these various positions. And so it is interesting. So it does go back. He says, for example, that the proponents of an equal number of apprehenders and apprehendeds is Shakyamuni, is an Indian Buddhist philosopher. And he says the half-agus, interestingly enough, the one we were talking about at the very beginning, there's someone called Shankarananda, who is, I guess, an Indian Buddhist philosopher. So this half-agus, so there were actually specific Indian Buddhist philosophers who actually proposed these various positions that are being detailed here. But many of these maybe only exist in Tibetan translation at this point. I think a lot of the Indian Sanskrit. So I don't know about in terms of the agus, maybe there's only the Tibetan term, maybe the Sanskrit has disappeared and all we have is a Tibetan translation. But there was a real Indian that
I wasn't saying there weren't real Indians. What I was saying is that the explanation of these three categories were analyzed by different Tibetans.
Okay.
You can find in Geshe Zopa and Jeffrey Hopkins' book, and that they had different interpretations of what they meant, and in great detail. So it was something that was perhaps an obsession for the Tibetans. Okay, let's go on. So where are we? Talked about etymology, right? There are two types of false Aspectarians: tainted false Aspectarians and untainted false Aspectarians. Because we spent so much time on that so far, I'm going to skip that now and go back to it in the next talk. But tainted false Aspectarians and untainted false Aspectarians. Okay, so etymology. Why are they called Chittamatrans? Proponents of mind only. The word proponent doesn't come in there, but they are called Chittamatra because they assert that phenomena are merely the nature of mind. Chitta, mind. Matra means only or mere. There's a famous, one of the sources of the name Chittamatra comes in the Lankavatara Sutra, when the Buddha said, all three realms are Chittamatra, are just mind, mere mind. And so there are other sources for that term, mere mind, but in the Madhyamaka Vatara, those of you who have studied Madhyamaka, and who have studied some of these other things, you'll know that Chandrakirti explains, and Nagarjuna explained that there was an intention there to say that the ulterior motive in the Buddha saying that was that the principal creator of the external world was the mind, as opposed to Indra or Brahma or something like this. That the principal creator of our existence is the mind from the Buddhist perspective. That's what he meant by mind. That was his ulterior motive. But it came to mean when Maitreya explained all of this to the Chittamatra system to Asanga, and Asanga then wrote texts on earth elaborating about it, it became this bifurcation that there is no external world which is not the nature of the mind. Everything is of the nature of the mind. Chittamatra, only mind. They're called a Chittamatran because they assert that all phenomena are merely the nature of the mind. They're called proponents of cognition, Nampa Rigpa, because they assert that all phenomena are merely the nature of cognition. More or less the same thing. Okay. They're also called Yogacharans, which I'm not sure, I think that comes a little bit later, because many of the texts that were written by Asanga were referred to this system as the Yogacara, so those who engage in yogic activity. There are two types of objects of knowledge. Now we're getting down to more familiar ground: ultimate truths and conventional truths. You remember what ultimate truths were for the Vaibhashika? Jeremy, do you remember? Come on. Ultimate truths were like partless particles and so forth, things that couldn't be broken up by a hammer and lose their identity and so forth. Here, an ultimate truth is that which is realized by a direct, valid cognizer, directly realizing it by way of the vanishing of dualistic appearances. So what does that mean? What is the dualistic appearance in the Chittamatra? A dualistic appearance is the appearance that things are separate entity from the consciousness that are perceiving them. So if I perceive a tree outside my window here, it looks like the tree is is separate from the consciousness. There is an inner consciousness and an outer object. That's called from Chittamatra point of view, that's called a dualistic appearance. The idea of dualistic appearance pervades all of the other higher schools. There's a different meaning of dualistic appearance in Madhyamaka and so forth. But here, it's when we talk about dualistic appearance, usually what we're referring to is from the Chittamatra point of view, the wrong appearance. The appearance is actually wrong, that there is a difference in entity between the consciousness and the object. The object is somewhere out there, and the consciousness is here. Whereas from the Chittamatra point of view, the existence of the object arises from the same seed as the subject consciousness that's knowing it. They arise simultaneously, and that what appears to be an outer object is actually the entity of the mind. So that's called a dualistic appearance. So the definition of an ultimate truth is that which is realized by a direct, valid cognizer directly realizing it. Maybe there's need for all those words, by way of the vanishing of dualistic appearance. So your eye consciousness for an ordinary being other than a Buddha, when you realize ultimate truth, you don't realize it with an eye consciousness. Your eye consciousness is sort of is caught into that. But when you meditate on that appearance with your mental consciousness, you realize through logic that the consciousness that seemed to be interior and the object that seemed to be exterior are devoid of that apparent duality, inner and outer, that it is empty of that dualistic appearance. Here the term says vanishing of dualistic appearances. I can't remember what in Sangye Kondo's text it said there. The Tibetan text says Nunang Nupa. Ninang, Ni means two, Nang means appearance. So the dualistic appearance. Nupa is, Nu means like when the sun sets, it's Nupa means to set or to decline, to go down. So does anyone have Sangye Kondo's text there? What does it say?
Yeah, Sandra, her text says the definition of an ultimate truth is that which is realized by means of a valid direct perceiver that realizes it clearly without dualistic appearances. So that realizes.
She just says without.
Yeah, without. And I assume that this must mean meditative equipoise in the path of seeing or higher. That
Doesn't have to be path of seeing. Can be when you the same as in when we talk about selflessness. You don't have to have be on the path of seeing to have a realization of selflessness. It's just not
But if you have a valid direct perceiver, wouldn't you have to have a direct valid perceiver? Wouldn't that have to be?
Okay, excuse me, I stand corrected. The definition of an ultimate truth. So that which is an ultimate truth is what is realized by the direct valid cognizer, directly realizing it by way of the vanishing of dualistic appearance. So you can still realize non-duality conceptually. It can be a correct, a realization of that, but it's not necessarily a direct realization of that. Ultimate truth, final reality, which is his translation here for dharmata. In Tibetan, dharmata is chuni. Sometimes we just say reality. I don't know if you have to say final reality. Sphere of reality, dharma dhatu. Have you heard of dharma dhatu, that term? Dharma dhatu. It's the name of, I think, a lot of Chögyam Rinpoche's dharma centers, right? So dharma dhatu sometimes refers to ultimate reality, to emptiness. Sometimes it just refers to all of the things which are known by the mind. But in this context, Dharma Dhatu is one of the synonyms of ultimate truth. And the final mode of abiding, Neluk Tartuk, they are equivalent. So Jeffrey Hopkins' translation of Dharma Dhatu is called the element of Arya qualities. One of the things, instead of saying the sphere of reality, it's the emptiness is that through which meditation on which the qualities of an Arya are generated. That's why he has a different etymology of that. There are two divisions of ultimate truths. Subtle selflessness of phenomena and subtle selflessness of persons. So now for the first time, in Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, we did not have a fully qualified selflessness of phenomena. We talked about just the selflessness of persons, right? Remember I mentioned in the Heart Sutra when Shariputra is asking Avalokiteshvara how the Bodhisattvas meditate on emptiness, how they practice the perfection of wisdom, rather. Avalokiteshvara says, they meditate on the emptiness of the five aggregates also, which means meditation on the emptiness of phenomena, not just the emptiness of the person. Generally, in the hearers and solitary realizers, we just talk about the selflessness of persons. So here, the selflessness of phenomena and the subtle selflessness of phenomena and the subtle selflessness of persons. When subtle selflessness of phenomena, when the subtle selflessness of phenomena is divided by way of the bases of emptiness, there are 20 emptinesses. So the subtle selflessness of phenomena is talking about the word emptiness, shunyata, right? It's divided by way of the bases of emptiness. There are 20 emptinesses. When they are condensed, there are 18. When they are condensed, there are 16. When they are condensed, there are 4 emptinesses, and so forth. So you could say, and when it says and so forth, for instance, if you even condensed it more, you could say the emptiness of phenomena and the emptiness of persons. So what does this mean? Generally, when we talk about emptiness, the way that you're delineating emptiness is the same. They're all of the 20 emptinesses, the 18, the 16, they're all truncated versions starting from the 20. You're still talking about the same lack of duality between subject and object, but the basis upon which you're investigating are different. So I did, although I didn't print out the 64 harmonious speeches, I did print out some explanation here about if I can find it, the emptinesses. So you can find in Jeffrey Hopkins' book on page 205, 204, and 205, the book called Meditation on Emptiness, when it talks about the 55 phenomena of the pure class. So generally, when we talk about phenomena in the Prajnaparamita Sutra, we talk about 108 kinds of phenomena. 55 of the pure class and 53 of the impure class. So the 55 phenomena of the pure class begin with the 6 perfections. There's 6. Then the 18 emptinesses, which are the path of the view. So here, when you talk about the 18, that's the more 20 can be added. 18 is sort of like the standard. Emptiness of the internal, that is emptiness of the 5 senses. Emptiness of the external, that is of the 6 types of objects, which are objects of the 5 senses, the 5 sense bases, and of the mental consciousness, the objects of those. That's called emptiness of the external. Then emptiness of the internal and external, inner and outer emptiness. That is the emptiness of the loci of the senses, the gross orbs of the eyes, and so forth. Then emptiness of emptiness. Have you heard of that expression, emptiness of emptiness? Even emptiness itself doesn't exist as it appears to a conventional mind in a dualistic fashion, is actually empty of that. Emptiness of the great, that great here means the 10 directions. Emptiness of the ultimate, that means emptiness of nirvana. Emptiness of products, emptiness of non-products, is compounded and non-compounded phenomena. Emptiness of what is passed beyond the extremes. That means what is free from the extreme of permanence and annihilation. Emptiness of what is beginningless and endless. That's the 10th, I think. Emptiness of the indestructible. That is of the indestructible Mahayana. Emptiness of nature. That is the emptiness which are the nature of phenomena. Emptiness of all phenomena. That means the emptiness of the 18 constituents, the 18 dhatus. Emptiness of definitions, emptiness of the unapprehendable. That means the past, present, and future, which are unapprehendable as the cessation of phenomena. Emptiness of inherent existence, of non-things. Oh, this is from the Prasangika point of view. Emptiness of the duality of non-things. Emptiness of things and emptiness of non-things. Anyway, there are all of these different what appears to be different kinds of emptiness are all delineated with reference to the objects that you were investigating. Okay? You could truncate it down when it talks about the four emptinesses, the first four of those, inner, outer, both inner and outer. That was the fourth one. Inner, internal, external, internal and external, emptiness of emptiness. Those are, if you go down to four. If you go down to two, you could say the emptiness of persons and the emptiness of phenomena. Illustrations of the subtle selflessness of phenomena are, for example, the emptiness that is a form and the valid cognizer apprehending that form's emptiness of being different substances, and the emptiness of that, and the emptiness that is a form's emptiness of existing by way of its own characteristic or its own character as a basis for applying the term form. So here's an important point. In Chittamatra, what we generally think of as emptiness or the selflessness of phenomena is the lack of duality between the object and the subject, that they are actually the same nature. What appears to our mind is that they are the same, that they are different natures, but they are actually empty of that duality. But another, from the point of view of the followers of reasoning especially, another interpretation of the subtle selflessness of phenomena is that forms do not exist by way of their own characteristic as a basis for applying the term form. So we were familiar, when we talked about inferential cognizers in the Sautrantika section, we talked about inferential cognizer of renown. Do you remember what that was? Anyone? Blank faces. Bob, you know.
I think it was inferential cognizers based on just things that commonly people accept, wasn't it?
Yeah, that the bearer of the rabbit was suitable to be called Moon, right? Or Moon, you know, there's a reason for putting it in that order. So as though names do not inherently exist or by their own characteristic exist within the basis. So this is a very subtle subject, and it is said that this particular kind of understanding is easier to realize than realizing the non-duality between subject and object, but that somehow in the final analysis, they are equivalent. just for your information, you might think, oh, this Chittamatra view is just some kind of odd, what do you call it, red herring, and that you wouldn't be able to practice Tantra on the basis of the Chittamatra view. What do you think? Can you practice Tantra on the basis of Chittamatra view? Rowena says yes, right? Can you say? Or you just nodding?
Yes, yes.
So what do you know about that?
I think it helps with visualization.
Oh,
I don't know whether
okay,
it makes-
yeah. No. But I mean, can you make higher tantric realizations on the basis of the Chittamatra view? What do you think,
I
Bob?
haven't had higher tantric realizations. so
Okay,
I don't
Bob,
know.
maybe Bob does.
I say no. I
You say
say
no.
no.
Who says no? Who's-
Donnie.
I think yes.
You're saying yes. Okay, good opinions. Okay,
I would say yes too.
okay. If truth was decided by consensus, that would be, those are opinions would be. Bob, what do you think? What have you heard? What have you read?
Well, what I've always read is that, in fact, that's one argument for Chittamatran, because the tantric practitioners say that it's so helpful for them in achieving tantric realizations using the Chittamatran point of view, because you're meditators, you're inside your mind. So of course you look at the whole world as being from inside your mind.
Okay, you're kind of like agreeing with Rowena. So Lama Tsongkhapa said that it is possible to achieve up to the, what's it called? The impure illusory body, which is when we talk about the completion stage of highest yoga tantra, isolation of body, isolation of speech, isolation of mind, so forth. One of the realizations along the path, it's not one of the 5 stages, but it's called the impure illusory body. You know what illusory body is kind of like from your meditating on yourself as Yamataka or something. It's a body which is created through the force of your meditation, through the channeling of the prana, the airs, and that it has a certain resiliency. Impure illusory body is one in which you have not realized emptiness directly yet, but you can. That's still a very, very high tantric realization. It is said through the Chittamatra view of realizing that. Where was the word here? The emptiness that is a form's emptiness of existing by way of its own characteristic as the basis for applying the term form. If you have that degree of understanding that names do not inherit characteristically abide within their objects, that is sufficient to achieve the impure illusory body. But to achieve the after achieving the impure illusory body, in order to get the pure illusory body, you have to have realization of clear light, which means emptiness of the mind. And so this does not, Yogacara, you wouldn't be able to go further than that, than the impure illusory body. But if you achieve the impure illusory body, you would be like incredible yogi or yogini. So there's great utility to this view. Okay, so it is said that it's easier to realize a form's emptiness of existing by way of its own characteristic as the basis for applying the term form. It's more easy to realize that than to actually realize that the subject that apprehends blue is the same nature as the object blue. As an illustration of this subtle selflessness of persons, they give the emptiness that is a person's emptiness of being self-sufficient, substantially existent. Generally, when we talked about the subtle selflessness of persons in the Vaibhashika and in the Sautrantika, we talked about the same selflessness of the person's emptiness of being self-sufficient, substantially existent, right? You remember that? Doris, do you remember that? Sorry to make you bend over.
No, that's okay. I do remember. I actually brought up my homework for the Heart Sutra.
Okay, so that's considered to be the subtle selflessness of persons for the Vaibhashika, the Sautrantika, and for the Chittamatra. Whereas for the Madhyamaka, in general, certainly for the Prasangika, that is not even, that is not the subtle selflessness of phenomena. That's what's called the gross selflessness of phenomena. So here, but for the Chittamatra, this is still a way for the beings of the hearer lineage and the solitary realizer lineage. They don't have to realize the emptiness of phenomena, the fact that form and form realizing consciousness are empty of being different, empty of that duality. They don't have to realize that. In fact, maybe some of them don't even meditate on it at all. They can, but they don't have to. They can just meditate on this so-called subtle selflessness of phenomena and achieve the hearer's nirvana or the solitary realizer's nirvana. This is sufficient from Chittamatra point of view to eliminate the obstructions to liberation, what are called the afflicted obstructions, the delusions. We together here? Getting complicated, right? This is especially the Aspectarians who's kind of like chewing the dry bones, right? You might say, I want to forget about that, but keep it in mind, it will come in handy. When I was teaching Lama Usel and Sarah, I was teaching him English and history and geography, reading, writing, arithmetic. We were doing some math problems. And, if the train leaves at this time and reaches that station, those kind of problems. Simple, from an adult's point of view. And Lama was saying, why do I have to study this? I'll never use this. I said, why not? And he said, I'll just ask my attendant when to take the train, when it arrives. And I said, no, sooner or later, there'll come a time. I'll have to write to him sometime and ask him if he's ever used some of these basic math skills. I said, sometime you're gonna be happy you knew this, how to figure this out. So the same thing here with the Aspectarians and so forth, and these other things that seem like dry bones. The definition of a conventional truth, again, Chittamatra, right? Conventional truth, is that which is realized by a direct valid cognizer, directly realizing it by way of being together with a dualistic appearance. Well, yeah, so I seeing blue or I seeing, tree or house or something like that. That's a direct valid cognizer, eye consciousness, right? But it is together with a dualistic appearance. What is appearing to the eye consciousness is that the tree and so forth is exterior, is out there, and the subject is in here, dualistically. So that is anything that has a dualistic appearance like that would be a conventional truth. There are two types of conventional truths: other-powered phenomena and conventional truths that are included in imputational constructs. I think Sangye Kando's translation says imaginaries. Okay, so to understand what this means, we have to have a little introduction into what are called the three characteristics or the three natures. This is one of the important concepts of Chittamatra, that's mentioned in many of the sutras. And it's not mentioned in our text, and I don't know why. I'll have to ask Steve, who studied Jason Trukey Gelson's text. I think because the three natures or three characteristics are mentioned, especially in the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, but here they're introduced in the Chittamatra, in the famous Samdhi Nimorchana Sutra, which is the source of these things. So I wanted to explain to you a little bit about that, and you can find it more referenced in Jeffrey Hopkins and Geshe Zopa's texts. Okay, here it says, assertions regarding objects. The proponents of mind only, Chittamatrans, assert that all objects of knowledge are included in the three characters. The three characters. What is that? Seni Sum, Tri-Lakshana. Lakshana usually means characteristic or character. Tri means three, like tricycle, right? From the Sanskrit and the Greek and so forth. So they're also called this Trisvabhava. Svabhava means nature in other contexts, but same thing. So these three things that are three characteristics or three natures. Other powered character or other powered nature, thoroughly established character or thoroughly established nature, and imputational character or imputational nature, or as Sangye Kondo says here, imaginary. The Tibetan word is kuntak, which often we talk about as, we sometimes just say imaginary. Thoroughly imputed, imputational. So what does this mean? You say, have you heard of that before? Have you heard of these three natures before? Three characteristics? Alicia, what do you think? Elise, have you? No? Mastriani? Karen, no? Tenzin Jiangsu?
No.
No. Someone is saying no. Tenzin Jiangsu was nodding yes or no?
Yes, I've heard of them before.
You've heard. Yarpel, have you heard of the three natures? Okay, so some of you have. Okay, so what does this mean? There's also an interpretation from Prasangika of these, but generally what this means is, what are the three that we're talking about here? Other powered phenomena, other powered characteristics. Other powered phenomena are those things that we generally say products, things that arise under the power of causes and conditions. Generally what we call impermanent phenomena or products, right? Maybe products is a better term because it means produced from causes and conditions. Thoroughly established phenomena, here if you talk about the characters, thoroughly established character or thoroughly established nature, but you could just call them thoroughly established phenomena, are phenomena that actually exist the way that they appear, which refers to emptiness. And imputational character, or here he calls it imputational constructs. I'm not sure in our Svensson's translation why he calls it constructs, imputational characters or imputational natures, or just imputations. What are imputational phenomena? Those are things which are created by the mind itself. Which, for instance, there are some that exist and that there's some that do not exist. So a non-existent imaginary or imputational construct would be like, what do you say? a form and the form realizing consciousness being different natures. That's an imaginary. It's constructed by the mind and it doesn't exist. There are some imaginaries or imputational constructs that do exist. Can you think of one? Which is only, it's not apprehended, it's not a product, so it's not a other powered phenomena. It's not a thoroughly established phenomena because it's not an emptiness, but it is created by the mind, such as space, non-obstructive, the lack of non-obstructive, the lack of obstructive contact, so non-obstruction. So let me read you a little bit from Jeffrey Hopkins and Geshe Zopa's on page 260. Assertions regarding objects. The Chittamatra asserts that all objects of knowledge are included in the three characters: other power characters, thoroughly established characters, and imputational characters. These three characters are also called the three natures, the Trisvabhava. This is so because they assert that all compounded phenomena are other powered characters, other powered phenomena. So when we talk about two kinds of conventional truths on our page 16 of our translation here, Svensson translation, other powered phenomena means all compounded phenomena. That the real nature of all phenomena, which means emptiness, are thoroughly established characters. They exist the way that they appear. And that all other objects of knowledge are imputational characters or imaginaries that are created by the mind. Except for emptinesses, all permanent phenomena, such as uncompounded space, are imputational natures or imputational constructs, uncompounded space. All emptinesses are thoroughly established natures. All impermanent phenomena are other powered natures. In this way, all phenomena are included in the three natures. Imputational natures or imaginaries, imputational constructs, are of two types: existent and non-existent. Now, the example that I think I'm not sure if our text is here. Oh, let's see. Am I getting in my microphone again? Is that rattling you? Conventional, so yeah. Other powered phenomena and compounded phenomena are equivalent. Conventional truths that are included in imputational constructs or imaginaries and uncompounded phenomena other than ultimate truths are equivalent. This is on page 17 of our text. Conventional truths. So conventional truths are not limited to the compounded phenomena. Conventional truths also include things like non-compounded space, uncompounded space. Conventional truths that are included in imputational constructs, or imaginary conventional truths, are such things as space, and uncompounded phenomena other than ultimate truths are equivalent. So there's two kinds of uncompounded phenomena: those which are imaginaries and existent, and ultimate truths. That means emptiness. Let me see. How about questions? Anyone want to stop for a second and catch your breath? Bob, catch your breath.
Yeah. So I assume that, thoughts that we have would be these imputational characters.
When you say thoughts, what do you mean? The consciousness or the object?
Well,
of the consciousness?
for example, maybe I'm thinking of a table.
Right.
So how would that fit into these three categories? It must be imputational character, right?
Well, the table itself that you're thinking about is a other powered phenomena, right?
Yeah, but what about the
consciousness with which you are apprehending that table via the mental image is a other powered phenomena. Consciousness itself, right? It's a compounded phenomena.
Yeah.
So you're knowing it via a mental image. The mental image is a construct by your mind. So that would be a imputational factor, imputational construct, or imaginary.
Yeah,
Does
that's
that-
what I was meaning, the mental image.
Is that mental image or meaning generality, is that an existent imaginary or a non-existent imaginary?
I think it's an existent imaginary.
Yeah, it exists. What would be a non-existent imaginary?
Maybe an image of the, I don't know, the famous horns of a rabbit or something.
Well, the image would exist,
Yeah,
but the object
Reference.
that you were imagining that it's referring to, the horns of a rabbit, that would be a non-existent imaginary. Or in the context of sort of yogic practice, the conception of a self of persons, in that the self of persons that you were imagining, so there's a mental image of the self of persons to your mind, that the image exists, the consciousness that's apprehending it exists, but the object that you're referring to doesn't exist at all. There's no self of persons. So that would be a non-existent imaginary. You follow? Nadine, what do you think?
George.
Yes.
Yes, I
is
can
not-
follow.
Wait. One second. First, I think Yarpel, were you asking?
Yes. So isn't the one of the thing we're talking about in the mind-only school, the imputational thing is the imputation of an object that's separate from the mind.
Say again, Venerable.
In the mind-only school, we're talking about this. The imputational thing we're imputing is that the object is separate from the mind. And so that is
That
what
is one kind of
that
imputational, that is one kind of imaginary, or the word in Tibetan is kuntak. Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to call it what do they call it? Completely imputed.
Yeah.
Kuntu means always or completely. Tak means imputed. So here we're talking about in what did he call it? Imputational constructs or imputational nature or imaginaries. There are things that are created by the mind that may or may not exist, because we know in our own, you can, there are certain things that, you say, you might think that when you think of your mother's face, you might think that that is an imaginary, right? When you have when you have an imagination of your mother's face, if I say it like that.
Yeah.
That actually, the object that you're thinking about does exist. The mental image of it does exist, but is not your mother's face. The consciousness that is knowing that does exist and is a other powered phenomena. So that's not called an imaginary. We might use the word imagine your mother's face, but that's not this kind of imaginary. Imaginary or thoroughly, what do we call it here? Imputational factor, imputational construct are things that are only created by your mind, that don't have their own substantial existence exterior, like uncompounded phenomena, like the uncompounded space. That is something that can't be apprehended by your senses. It's something that is known by your mental consciousness by means of imputing its existence. It's an imputational existent.
So isn't this imputation, we're imputing upon the mind-only school's viewpoint, we're imputing upon it that the object is separate from the mind. The object exists out there. And so that imputational thing is what we're trying to negate.
That particular one that you're talking about, the fact that you might have an imagination that, from a Chittamatra point of view, it's an imagination. From a Prasangika point of view, it would be correct that there is an exterior world separate, out there, separate from the cognition that's knowing it, that duality. That kind of, that is an imputational nature or imputational construct, but it is a non-existent imputational construct. Some imputational constructs do exist.
Yes.
Another famous one is, as Bob said, the horns of a rabbit, right? You know the origin of this. Do rabbits have horns? I sometimes think that maybe there's some obscure breed somewhere. Generally, the idea of the horns of a rabbit is that on the foggy, day, you look outside and you see this rabbit out there, or hare, with its ears up, and you say, there's horns. Yeshe Tekchok, when he was teaching us at Manjushri Institute many years ago, decades ago, he had this postcard, what do they call it, jackalope? Like a jackrabbit with horns. I'm sure what it's called.
Jackalope, yeah.
Jackalope. So he had that, and he had it under his robe here. And I remember Helmut, one of our monks, while we were saying the prayers, just when we stopped the prayers and you're sort of getting your seat together and putting your papers in front, he took out this picture and showed it to Helmut, and he was laughing, the horns of a rabbit, So that is that's also a non-existent imputational construct. It's constructed by your mind, and it does not exist. It's not to say that you don't have a mental image of the horns of a rabbit. That exists. The consciousness that is thinking about the horns of a rabbit as though they exist, that consciousness exists. It's a wrong consciousness. But the object that you're imagining doesn't exist, the horns of a rabbit. Okay? Does that help? Now, Nadine, you also were about to speak at the same time, I think, right?
Is it like the more of this kind of consciousness you have, the more problems? I imagine it must be problematic to have many of this kind of concepts.
Many of these kind of what? Rabbits?
Wrong concepts. I don't know the name. My English is not so good. I'm sorry, but I can follow you when you speak.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, right. So these what are called imputational or imaginary characters. That means they are only imagined. They don't have a basis of existing that you could apprehend with the senses and so forth. They're constructed by imputation, by the mind. So if you have a lot of wrong ideas about the world, those would would fall into, or about nature or reality, those would fall into non-existent imputational factors. Okay, so here, the reason I brought up those three is just because they're not, although they're a very important part of the Chittamatra, they're not mentioned in our text. I think maybe because when the students study, they actually study Chittamatra when they're studying in the monastic school, and there's more explanation of this. And also in the Svatantrika Madhyamaka, also they talk about the three natures. So it's maybe that's the reason why Jason Shuki Gelson didn't mention it here. But in other texts on the Chittamatra, it's always mentioned as an important subject. So here it says there are two types of conventional truths, right, that still have dualistic appearance. Other powered phenomena, that means products, we apprehend them, tastes and smells and sights, sounds, tactile sensations, we apprehend them in a dualistic manner, as though there's some object out there and the subject is separate from a different nature, whereas in reality, they're, from Chittamatra point of view, they're the same nature. So those are called conventional truths. And then there are conventional truths that are included within the imaginaries or imputational constructs. Other powered phenomena and compounded phenomena are equivalent. Conventional truths that are included in imputational constructs and uncompounded phenomena other than ultimate truths are equivalent. So there are other kinds of uncompounded phenomena other than emptiness. And other than space. And what is another kind of uncompounded phenomena other than ultimate truths and other than space? What do you think, Bob?
That's these, I forget the name, permanent cessations or something.
Yeah, in the Abhidharma Kosha says the uncompounded are space and the two cessations. But also Geshe Zopa used to say there are numberless kinds of non-affirming negations. You know, the non-existence of an elephant in this room right now is a uncompounded phenomena.
You were checking.
No one liked that one. Okay. So I'm going to stop here and ask for a moment if you have any questions that are like, oh, come on, he made a whopper. I remember Geshe Tekchok used to say when he taught, he might make some subtle mistakes, but he, at least as it was translated at the time, I don't know what Geshe said in Tibetan, he said, but I never make a whopper. You know, in my case, I might very well make some whoppers, not like Geshe Tekchok. So I'm counting on you to point out. So anything that, any questions that you have? Karen, is that? Oh, no, okay. Tenzin Jangdu?
Yeah, so I have a question, and my question would be whether or not this is a mistake. Because as you're describing these imputations, right? My mind kept going back to the Sautantrika discussions, which talk about inferential cognitions. And to me, as I thought about it, I thought that this imputation is actually an inferential process in the mind. So my question is it a mistake to kind of equate those two terms as somehow synonymous, but in different tenet systems?
Inferential cognition is a consciousness, right? It's an inferential cognizer. It's a consciousness, so it's an other powered phenomena. It is knowing something by means of a sign, like a logical argument or reasoning. Sound is impermanent because it's a product or something like this. You can even understand emptiness through that, the appearance of blue and a blue apprehending consciousness as being different natures, like the consciousness here and the object is out there, is empty of existing that way because phenomena and the apprehending consciousnesses are of one nature. You can know those things, but there's not a direct correlation between inferential cognizer and imputational nature or imputational character or imaginary. This is talking about phenomena that are merely imputed by the mind when we talk about imaginary or imputational phenomena. When we talk about merely imputed by the mind here, not the same as in Prasangika, when we talk about phenomena are merely imputed by the mind, slightly different meaning there. We'll talk about that more. Someone else have a question? Janchub, you have another? No? Okay. So some more people appeared. Interesting that weren't there before. You don't have your cameras on. So Bob will lead discussion after class again. Let's end with a short dedication. Relax your mind, let go of everything other than the fact that this morning we have created a collection of merit. Maybe we may not have accumulated the collection of wisdom unless we've had some insights into real emptiness, but we've collected merit, which brings about the eventually becomes a cause of the Buddha's bodies, but is the main cause of our taking rebirths in the future and our pleasant and pleasurable experiences within cyclic existence. So I think whatever merits I've created this morning, I'm going to dedicate them, aspire, wish that they bring about their result in my path toward enlightenment. Whatever merits I've created, may they become the cause of my continued spiritual development from life to life, up to and including enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's my final destination. Right now, there are many obstacles to our dedicating like that. The idea that we don't want to give money to others because then we won't have it, and so forth. Due to these merits, gewadi, due to these merits or virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme precious Buddhacita that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. That's a famous verse. Then it's not a long life prayer for the Dalai Lama, but prayer that his wishes be fulfilled. Wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech. It's not beseech. May all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. when it says at the end, Lundrup Shok. Shok means may. Lundrup, may spontaneously, may your wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Then, you who uphold the subduer's moral way, subduer means the Muni, the Shakyamuni, who serves as a bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplishes magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. This is actually long life prayer. Venerable to you whose kindness exceeds that of all the conquerors, for those wanderers in far off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us in intentionally descending again into a family of a far distant land, we make this request. O Lama, please, please live long. So thank you for chewing bones with me this morning. Chittamatra is particularly vexing because of some of the, apparent contradictions, but the practitioners of, Maitreya, the future Buddha, Maitreya gave instructions on this idea. You might think, oh, this is completely wrong because there's the problem of solipsism that you can't prove other beings, but there's some intention here. It's said that in highest yoga tantra, in the completion stage of highest yoga tantra, when you withdraw all the airs into the central channel and have an experience of emptiness, when the airs begin to come out again and you have a vision of the outer world, there's the understanding that all of that is the nature of your own mind. So there may be subtle, great reasons for understanding this. You don't think so, Elise? You're going.
I'm just thinking about all of that and the idea that perhaps other minds don't exist. And I'm trying to piece it together.
Right. Yeah, there are some problems in talking about that, but they still talk about collective karma that we do, for instance, even if you accept the Chittamatra view, you have to say the things that it looks like, you hug your mom, you talk to friends, you have the appearance of externality, but you have an inner certainty that your particular experience of that is just the nature of your mind. And that is said to be a great stepping stone to realizing emptiness later, to overcome the certainty that things exist the way that they appear. And this one say. So thank you very much.
Thank you, George.
Hope to see you next week. And have a good